The Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. It's been a busy day here in the studio. Lots going on news and politics-wise. Someone not a stranger to either, Steve Brown with the Rhode Island ACLU. Thanks for coming in today because I wanted you to bring folks up to speed. We've seen things and heard things of what's going on in Smithfield with medical marijuana. There was some action in court today. What happened?
There was. Judge heard our lawsuit today. We filed it a couple months ago against the town of Smithfield. They adopted an ordinance that we think is a clear violation of the state's medical marijuana law. It sets numerous egregious restrictions on the ability of patients who live in the town of Smithfield to be able to grow their own marijuana, have a caregiver who can grow marijuana for them. And our basic position is that the General Assembly passed a very comprehensive law dealing with medical marijuana, the protections for people who want to grow it, and that this ordinance simply cannot withstand scrutiny when you compare it to the state law.
So talk with us. We're here in Rhode Island. Is there any case law elsewhere in states around the country that have seen this type of action by a town with medical marijuana that said, you know, we're going to put limits on it? Or is this a unique situation?
Yeah, this is really something that ultimately is addressed by Rhode Island law and not what is going on anywhere else. Our state legislature passed a very, very comprehensive law. The Department of Health and the Department of Business Regulation have adopted really extensive regulations governing the medical marijuana program, and we don't think that there are 39 cities and towns that can on their own just adopt their own policies as to how patients can use medical marijuana. You know, I think it's important to understand exactly what some of these restrictions are that Smithfield has passed. The state law says that medical marijuana patients can grow up to 12 marijuana plants. This ordinance says you can only have 2. The ordinance bans what the state law allows in terms of caregivers. So a patient can ask somebody else to grow the marijuana for them if they don't feel comfortable growing it themselves. The caregiver is able to do that, but this ordinance bars caregivers completely from growing in Smithfield. So there are literally hundreds of people who are affected by this ordinance, and the impact is so great that we're hopeful that after reading all the briefs, after having the argument today, the judge will agree with us that this ordinance simply is in violation of state law.
And you're in the courts often. Again, you were in today. Do we have any sense of time frame on this?
We do. After hearing all the arguments, and they were fairly lengthy, the judge had a lot of questions for both sides, but after it was all done, he said that he hoped to issue a decision within a month.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, we're hopeful that we will get a decision within a month. We're hopeful that it's a favorable decision. And it's particularly important because we're seeing a lot of other municipalities begin looking into adopting similar types of ordinances. So if we aren't able to stop this one, you know, they may see patients having problems all over the state.
Now here we are, we have existing law. This is the medical marijuana side of things, but we saw some action on kind of almost preemptive measures on the recreational side. We haven't seen full-scale legalization yet here in Rhode Island, if it's to happen. Is the fact that because there's a state law in place is what you feel is the strongest argument that the city can't or town can't come and supersede it?
Yeah, it's not just that the state law is in place, it's that a state law that's very comprehensive in the specifics is in place. So it's not as if Rhode Island just passed a general law saying medical marijuana can be used. They have very detailed standards that are in the law, and the Department of Health and the Department of Regulation, which both have jurisdiction over implementing the law, have regulations that are dozens and dozens and dozens of pages long. So that's all you know, set out there for people to follow, and it simply isn't appropriate, and we're arguing it's simply not legal for a town like Smithfield to say, well, we don't care what all these state regulations say or what the state law says, we're going to adopt our own policy.
And what's Smithfield's justification? Is there some sort of fear factor? Do they think people are going to sell it on the black market? What are they saying that we need to clamp down on this for this reason?
Well, they really said very little, and that was an issue that came up during the hearing. The judge kept on pressing the town's attorney, what is the reason for this? And the town's attorney essentially said, we did this as a matter of public health and safety. And the judge kept pressing and asked for something more specific. And you know, the only specific thing that the attorney said was, well, it might cause more robberies if people know that people are growing marijuana. Then you know, they might be robbed. And the judge came right back and he said, well, You know, do you have banks in the town? You know, do you ban banks because they might be
the
robbed?
judge said that?
Yeah, the judge asked that question, and I think it's very good. It really is not a strong argument.
So you think you're going to get an answer within the month?
Yes. Well, by the end of next month.
Is that the only thing pressing right now with medical marijuana in the state?
We do have another lawsuit pending. We got a favorable decision just a few months ago. We think that the decision is going to be appealed, and that has to do with employment discrimination. We're representing a person who was denied a job at a westerly company because she took medical marijuana and therefore wasn't able to pass a drug test. We got a favorable decision on that, and we're hopeful that on appeal, if it's appealed, we'll get a favorable decision as well.
Okay, so that's the medical marijuana side of things. It's the end of August. The General Assembly will be back in September.
Yes.
You're always up there when the Assembly's in. What are you keeping an eye on?
Well, it's really hard to say. We're keeping an eye on, hoping that they don't suddenly pull rabbits out of the hat that we aren't aware of. There clearly were a few very big issues that were left on the table when they recessed in June. The gun bill, sick pay are probably two of the biggest ones. But we're keeping our eyes out to check on anything and everything that might come up.
Well, wanted to give folks an update what was happening with Smithfield, because as you said, other cities and towns are watching what happens with this particular court case. Anything else that you think folks should know that we didn't touch upon, or you touch upon because you're the expert on this?
Well, I think people who are concerned about this, especially medical marijuana patients or caregivers, should check and see what's going on in their own municipality. It's possible that their city or town council might be considering a medical marijuana ordinance of their own, and it's important that they hear from people in the community with their concerns if, in fact, they're trying to restrict the use of medical marijuana in the municipality.
Well, I appreciate your coming in again to bring it right to the folks here who hear about things and might not know the nuances of it. There was some focus, obviously, this session on full-scale legalization. Do you think we'll see that here in the state?
I think we will. It's a matter of time.
Not if,
whether
but
it's
not
1
if,
year,
but when.
3 years, I don't know, but its time is coming.
Do you think, there's the argument we need to look and see what happens in Mass? Does that really hold? I mean, 2018 is right around the corner.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's a good excuse for not moving forward, but we do have experiences now elsewhere. And it just makes sense for so many different reasons.
Well, as I said, I appreciate you're bringing to light some issues that folks, especially in the medical marijuana community, should be aware of moving forward with what's happening with Smithfield. I know you were in court. I know you're a busy guy, so I'll let you off to the races, and we will have you back in here soon. Because you're not too far from us.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you, Kate.
Steve Brown with the Rhode Island ACLU. I'm going to let go back around the corner. I know, as I said, off to the races, talking about being in court today. Again, the town of Smithfield trying to curtail some growing capacities, caregiving capacities in the town, not in concert with the law that was passed statewide. So the ACLU is suing to make sure that the state law is upheld within the town. As Steve Brown mentioned, the judge mentioned that probably a decision will be made within the month. It's always difficult to get a time frame, especially on legal issues, but did hear today about that. So if you're curious about what's going on in the medical marijuana community, that's right up there here in the state. So I appreciate Steve giving us a little briefing about the legal side of things here.